Okay, welcome to another Coffee with Samso. Today I've got Christian Easterday here from Hot Chile. Christian's been on Coffee with Samso already, and we've had a good chat about his Chilean porphyry project. But you've got an announcement out just recently, and Christian, welcome, and let us know about it.
Good to see you, Noel. Good to see that you're okay. Since the last pre-COVID Coffee with Samso. But yeah, like you say, we've been quite busy since the world changed, and obviously our recent announcement outlined some of the things that we've been working on since we turned our drill rigs off to make sure that all of our people over in Chile were safe, and it's been a busy time. But
yeah, I mean, look, I've always liked your project, and we talked quite extensively about it the last time. I think that the announcement there's a couple of things that I quite like. Obviously, the first one is that you can sort of go into production or get into a production position very quickly.
yes,
And also what is actually happening at Cordillera, which is really your masterpiece over there.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of coming off the back of a very strong period of drilling news flow. 6 world-class intercepts at Cordillera, and really a deposit that we acquired in February that has absolutely shot the lights out with the results that we've been able to achieve, particularly since July when we discovered a high-grade core underneath the main porphyry. But no, since we've had to take a bit of a pause in the drilling, and hopefully that'll be restarting very shortly. There were a number of things that I did, and in fact, I was over in PDAC in Canada for the large mining conference there, and on my way over to Chile about the same time as coronavirus really sort of took the world by storm, and so my trip, which was meant to be going and looking at a very ambitious 250 metre step out hole that we were drilling at the time, was actually going to see the team and stop all drilling activities. But while I was over in Chile, we were able to do some very good business with our stakeholders and our key partners over there. And one of those, we've been announcing a pretty transformative transaction in terms of just a junior company being able to bring forward early cash flow, and that was with the Chilean government and agency ANAMI. They're a very large mining company run by the government that facilitates local production, and they happen to own a very large processing facility in the town of Vallenar, which sits right next to our projects. So they employ about 400 people there, and they had a processing facility which was terribly undersupplied. So we've been able to ink an agreement and this week formalise that agreement to bring forward first production for the company. It's likely to see around about $1.2 to $1.5 million of revenue to Hot Chile, and that will look to exploit some of the high-grade areas out of our Productora development. A development that's already 250 million tonnes, open pit reserve of about 167 million tonnes. So the agreement is for around 120,000 tonnes per annum of ore supply. We'll be targeting grades probably in excess of 1.2% copper, and we're very fortunate that, of course, this allows us to reach early revenue without any capital outlaid, and really is just a lease mining and processing agreement with the government. So given we've got 2 underground mines already there that they can access immediately, very much looking forward to our shareholders seeing first revenue out of our assets. So we announced that this week, but I guess a lot of people are more interested in when the drilling on Cordillera is going to get underway, and hopefully we can continue to achieve the world-class intercepts which have been coming out of that deposit. But certainly, as you mentioned, there were a couple of other things in the announcement which caught people's attention. So I hope I hope you also appreciated what we were showing on Cordillera.
I mean, look, Cordillera has always been sort of I remember from our last conversation where it sits in the valley. It's 2 kilometres sort of strike. And what you've got is actually not just soil samples. You've actually got drill intercepts, and you can see that it's of substance, right? Obviously, you're in the system.
Yeah. So Cordillera started life as a private discovery that we took 2 years to be able to secure an acquisition agreement on with a very wealthy, large Chilean family, the Corolla Group. So while I was also over in Chile, and this comes back to the relationships that we have, and they certainly bear fruit, those relationships, when you meet crisis, and obviously being able to ink the agreement with the government for a lease mining agreement on Productora was really key to just strengthening our working capital position and strengthening our ties with the government, and more importantly bringing forward a mining license on Productora. And really that's quite critical in terms of this entire coastal development hub which we're working on being able to be brought forward in terms of when we can commence production. This may well be production at a small scale facilitated by the government, but it allows that mining license to be put in place on Productora, and really at the same time we're looking at our high grade opportunities out of the San Antonio deposits of the world, and in fact in Productora quite a number of key high grade areas within that very large reserve that we have. But when we talk about Cordillera and where the focus of the company actually is on what looks really to be a world-class discovery in the making, the Corolla family were able to sit down with me, and our acquisition payment timetable we were able to push out by 12 months, and that gave us a lot of breathing space to be able to firstly deal with what just hit the world, but more importantly to give us more time to be able to continue our drilling and our investment there. So since we turned off the drill rigs in March, we pivoted our team towards estimating a first resource from all of that drilling that we completed last year, and we were able to put all of that data together over the last few months, and within the announcement on Figure 3 was really the hidden treasure in that announcement, which we didn't talk about a lot, but I think that there's that saying that a picture speaks 1,000 words, and this is one of those moments. So we're showing the new version 3 model that is being driven by Steve Garwin, who is the key and lead consultant guiding the Cascabel discovery for SolGold. So using very similar techniques and really driving our exploration approach on Cordillera. That exploration approach has delivered 6 world-class intercepts in a row, so I don't think there's any question as to whether it's working or not. But we're now able to actually show our shareholders in the market the fruits of that effort. So the first resource, obviously we've been letting the market know that we anticipate that coming out in a couple of months. But we're really able to now show the extent of the high-grade core at Cuerpo 3. And this is something that from July last year was not in the discovery that had been drilled to date. So we've been able to achieve intercepts with grades ranging between 0.7 and 0.9% copper and 0.3 to 0.5 grams per tonne gold over hundreds of metres within the centre of that main porphyry. And what that long section really shows is that high-grade core is growing very significantly. And in fact, really what it's saying is we really just need more drilling density in that to probably be able to double what people are looking at in front of them, where our wireframes aren't able to expand past the limit of where the block model is likely to interpolate that grade. So I guess you sort of have that aha moment with a picture like that when you realise what you're looking at, and you're looking at something that you can put into context with a discovery like SolGold's Cascabel. There you have a massive deposit that Nick Martha and the team and Steve Garwin have built over a number of years, and that, you know, that's some 3 billion tonnes, grading 0.37% copper, 0.2 grams gold. And you know, that discovery is now over 10 million tonnes of copper and over 23 million ounces of gold in ground, and it's a legitimate monster. So when you line this up side by side with Cordillera, you realise you have the same footprint dimension. You mentioned 2 kilometres, about 2.3 kilometres. But when you look at the true value of the Cascabel Alpala deposit,
Yep.
oh yeah, that'd be great.
Long blacks, yeah.
Cappuccino?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, in terms
Yes.
of for the use, I guess. I mean, people don't understand. I mean, you mentioned the grades. I mean, and then you mentioned the actual metal content, and those are the metal content's a big number, like massive. Right? But when a lot of people, when they think porphyry, when they think the grade, oh, it's only 0.37. Oh, it's only half a gram. Straight away, the mentality is that, as we've discussed before, is that hey, that's not very high, but they have to take into consideration we're talking about size, millions of tons, hundreds of millions of tons, right? As opposed to 10 million tons.
That's right. Well, in any deposit, Noel, as you know, you have lower grades and you have higher grades, and I think that you know, my point with Cascabel is they have a really sizable 440 million tonnes of that 3 billion tonnes. You know, that grade's about 1.2% copper equivalent. So that's the copper and gold put together. And that really is the heart of Alpala and that deposit. It starts at about 600 metres depth and is going to be the subject of a large block cave. And to put into context, how does that sit with grades around the world for large-scale copper developments? You know, it sits certainly in the top half of the table. So there's a lot of deposits like Cadia Ridgeway that are, you know, have head grades of probably less than half of that, and are making, you know, record profits for companies like Newcrest. So that's really the solid value that probably the majors like BHP and Newcrest see in that deposit. Obviously, with 3 billion tonnes, that thing is going to extend in mine life for several decades. But when you put that side by side with Cordillera, and we see really, you know, the grand opening of what we've been working on here with all of those world-class intercepts. You know, the high-grade core at Cuerpo 3, starting from 200 metres depth and open in most directions, particularly at depth. And we're not drilling the zone between, you know, 800 metres and 2,000 metres vertical, where SolGold are drilling for their high-grade area. But what you see is Cuerpo 3's high-grade core has got a long way to grow, and more importantly, you look across at the neighbouring porphyry right next to it, Cuerpo 2, and you see a little pink blob, and probably important to keep your eyes on the pink in this figure, because that is where that's very similar grade to SolGold's high-grade area is at Cordillera. And we're now starting to turn our attention to Cuerpo 2, and I think it's not a coincidence that high grade in those historical holes starts to pop up at that same vertical depth as it did in July when we decided to test whether the deposit at Cuerpo 3 was actually getting better at depth. And the rest is history, so to speak, on the drilling. Everyone knows what's happened there. So we'll be looking not only to see whether Cuerpo 2 and Cuerpo 3 join up at depth, but more importantly, whether we have an expansive amount of high grade starting to come up on this deposit, you know, at that similar vertical depth level. So, you know, there's a lot to like on what's coming, and really the drilling that we're about to start, that is focused towards a second resource estimate at Cordillera. So we're looking to get that underway, hopefully shortly, and confirm that to the market soon. And that will be, you know, started well in advance of when we expect to put out our first resource on all the drilling that's been done before we turn drill rigs off on at the beginning of March. So I guess what we're sort of, you know, talking about here is very simply, you know, SolGold had a sort of finger that extended from surface down to 600 metres and turned into a hand. And what you have at Cordillera is within the same strike length, We have about 3 fingers extending down from surface, and it's very likely that this deposit, like many of the world leading porphyry deposits, will probably coalesce and join at depth with a little bit of luck. But what's really exciting for us is that the heart and the core of where all the metal is at Cordillera, similar to Cascabel, seems to extend from a lot shallower distance from surface, from about 200 metres rather than 600 metres, and that's really, really important.
I mean, structurally, we can see it regionally. You've got the strike length, and you've got these deposits running in the same sort of orientation. Are you seeing in the geology, in your drill core, that the microstructures would indicate maybe what you're saying, that they're all going to most likely join into a hand?
Yeah, I think it's always funny. You get people that love to talk about. There's the glass half full crowd and there's the glass half empty crowd, and the glass half empty crowd are always the loudest when a new discovery is made. And it reminds me, one of my directors said that just to give me some encouragement, that for years the original FMG management team used to post up all of the media articles and all of the knockers and the glass half empty crowd, all of their statements about why FMG would never amount to anything, would never be the third force in iron ore, would never get production up in that time frame, and never be production of the scale and profitability of the majors. And they use that to motivate themselves. And Steve Garwin tells me very similar things at the beginning with SolGold, when they had 6 or 7 world-class intercepts. Their market cap was very small, their share price was under 3p, and at a particular point in time the penny dropped, and they attracted obviously the attention of the majors, in firstly Newcrest and BHP. And these things are often very big visions by teams that bring them forward, and really they're borne out by the results. And certainly we're in a very similar situation, and people are wondering why 6 world-class intercepts still has a company, at $30 million market cap, very similar to where Steve and the SolGold team were at that point in time. So look, the drilling will always do the talking. The numbers will always do the talking, and I think that we're very much looking forward to getting the next phase of drilling underway on Cordillera, because we really do have a tiger by the tail here, and we'll be testing all of these things, seeing whether Cuerpo 2 has a high-grade core underneath it, and that the grade increasing at depth there is not isolated, and starting to test some of the bigger expansion theories on the porphyries, which remain open. So it's going to be very, very exciting. But most importantly, what we're trying to do is guide the business very prudently and very carefully at the moment. I don't think that anyone goes through a situation like this and expects to be business as usual. So as you know, Noel, we recently completed a capital raising to shore up our treasury, and that's certainly made everyone feel a lot more secure in terms of our targeted timeframes and delivering what is probably going to be about the richest period of news flow our company has ever looked forward to, and that's really the next 2 to 6 months for Hot Chili. We have a first resource estimate on Cordillera coming out in the next couple of months, followed by a first resource estimate on San Antonio, our high-grade satellite open pit asset that we drilled out a number of years ago, and it sits 4 kilometres from Cordillera. And more importantly, we're also underway with shaping what this large potential combined production hub is going to look like. And for all of the years of effort we put in over in Chile, and to be sitting with a head start with Productora, and now being able to open up first production with the government, see what that high grade looks like, be able to do reconciliation on it, and drag all of these elements together. It's going to be an exciting time to be able to put that thematic and put that narrative together over the next 6 months. But most importantly, I suppose, you know, what we're aiming to do is make sure that Hot Chili, like the other companies that have been able to achieve capital raisings in the last 3 months, and there hasn't been many at our end of the market. You know, and they're really generally associated with some of the best discovery stories going around in Australia. You know, the De Greys of the world with Hemi up in the Pilbara. You know, the Legends, the Chalice, the Bellevues. All of those real discovery stories are seeing a lot of support in the market. But the companies are obviously also having to put down discounts on their raisings, and it's something that we've also had to do. So when you find yourself in a situation like that, you often tend to, you know, direct the funding towards your supporters and direct it towards your shareholders, so that if a discount is had to be put down to ensure the company is well funded, then you make sure that you don't forget where your friends are.
Look, in my sort of crystal ball long shot, the way I see you guys is, you know, your level of interest is may not have been there in the past, but I think you get the likes of the Havrons of this world, where suddenly, you know, a couple of holes and everyone's such an interest, and then suddenly Newcrest is in there. What I'm trying to get is that porphyry's always been sort of an known thing, but an unknown thing. It's a funny situation, and the fact that you guys raised the money and that gave confidence in the company. And interestingly, you know, what I saw with your production part of the announcement was that suddenly you're able to open up and have a look at and get payable knowledge of what these things look like. And let's face it, right? When you're next to each other, you're pretty much in the same family. In the system like this, so you can understand. There's a lot of understanding you suddenly have in front of your face because you're actually down there mining it.
That's right, and you know, we're very blessed with the nature of our deposits. From what we know about them, there are very few Tier-1 copper assets that don't reside in the hands of a major globally, and so combining all of these assets together and potentially having a Tier-1 asset, and that's 5 million tonnes and above of contained copper, to have that on the coastline of Chile, next to a port, and more importantly, exactly what you said, when you start looking at what are these deposits are chalcopyrite deposits. That's where the copper is hosted, and one of the really unique things here is they're completely clean of arsenic. We don't have arsenic that even really rarely breaks detection limits in our drilling. So we have a very clean sources of chalcopyrite bearing ore. We have a processing facility in Vianar that's going to start, you know, opening up first production. We'll learn a lot about the processing behaviour of Productora high grade, and I think that with any of these deposits, it's, you know, outside of all of those advantages, infrastructure and location and clean concentrate, etc., you know, what is the sexiness about the deposits that is going to attract funding and allow these things to get up and be mined? You know, and often that's associated with grade. It's something the Australian mining industry very much concentrates on, and so does everyone in the world. And to finally, for Hot Chili, be in a position where we can now start to focus on grade, when you have a lead deposit that emerges, such as Cordillera has, and this thing is really dwarfing Productora. Productora was never going to be what Cordillera is looking like it can likely become in a very short period of time. You've got to remember, Cordillera doesn't have a resource estimate on it. Was a collection of drill holes done by a private investor, and you're now about to, within a year of announcing its acquisition and commencing drilling, has something that arrived that moves straight to the top of the table in terms of global projects available outside of the hands of a major. You add that to Productora, and then you look at the deposit and say, we've only really just begun here. The high grade has emerged over the last 6 months. The deposit is still open in most key directions. you're looking at something pretty rare. If these things happen very often, then there wouldn't be a scramble by all of the majors to position themselves with the pipeline of large copper supply. So to have sexiness about it and large tonnage, high grade positions that can be extracted by bulk mining methodologies, really it's allowed us to look at all of the rest of the assets, Productora, San Antonio, and say, where can we take the really high grade areas out of those to be able to culminate a lot of high grade material early to pay for Cordillera, pay for the entire infrastructure, and get that high grade, large tonnage, long life underground up and going. So this is about really shielding capital, a de-risking strategy, and I think, as you said, when you can open up and start mining early, and a mining license can be put in place that allows us to leverage all of that high grade supply, you've just moved Productora, Cordillera, and all of our assets from 2027 perhaps, 2028, when you've been able to do all of this work and build your new life of mine plan and bring it to a definitive feasibility and go through standard financing pathways, but you've been able to bring that all the way through to 2020 and the commencement of production through the government at small scale, and that allows us to really now target a staged lift up in that story. So we're not now sitting here as a proposition for many years away. We're a proposition that is opening up this year.
Yeah, no, I sort of like, although you're in some ways being conservative in what you're saying in your production, I think that's a big play that once you fit into the bigger picture like you've just described, there's a sequence of events that follows from each other. Look, I think I've already said this many times. I think it's a fantastic story. I mean, logistically, you are actually different from the other Chile porphyries as well. You're sort of closer to infrastructure. When time to come, I think your capex will be offset against any other sort of negative you may have, which is a big play when you come to mining, right?
That's right.
Big costs.
Large scale undergrounds, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
They may well give you the opportunity for long life, tier 1 production scale on copper and gold, but they need to be paid for. So we're very lucky with all of that work that was done on Productora. It is not going to go to waste. Even the production this year, you look at 120,000 tonnes per annum. We have 167 million tonnes in open pit reserve. And you look at the high grade component of Productora, which is now the subject of an internal review and modelling that's going on, and really, that production isn't going to even touch the sides. So the benefit that it brings to the company is really can't be understated, and more importantly, the relationship with our local community, safeguarding those 400 jobs and partnering with the Chilean government, really can't be understated in terms of what we're doing for the much larger play here. And the much larger play is not just about bringing a new large-scale producer to the market. This is about bringing a lot of benefit to the local community in which we operate and in Vianar, and hopefully that's something that we can scale up from jobs being secured now to really employment of quite a lot of people in the coming years. So no, it's a really exciting time. COVID certainly threw a spanner in the works. We had an almost flawless run of these drilling results, and hopefully very shortly we're going to be able to confirm that that's going to get underway, and we're already planning to expand the first resource with the drilling that's about to kick off.
I guess you're not the only one that's affected by COVID, but that's sort of in the past in some ways. I mean, what we've just been talking reminded me of my conversation with Rick Rule, where he said those with money don't have to worry about looking on the right-hand side of the menu. So in comparison to, it's like when you talk about your million tons and your metal content, to me, straight away reminded me you don't have to look on the right-hand side of the menu in that regards, you know.
That's right. Yeah. Well, Rick's a good friend, and he's got a lot better sayings. Been around the industry a lot longer than I have, Noel. But yeah, this announcement is a sort of almost a very similar saying. You know, we showed the market with our left hand what we're doing with the government and planning to do with the recommencement of drilling. But you know, the picture that does 1,000 words, showing off the first picture of our new model on that's the prelude to our first resource at Cordillera is very much what we're doing with our right hand. So that is yet to come. So hopefully everyone likes to focus on the high grade pink areas of that plan and fully appreciate what they're actually looking at.
As everybody do. But mate, look, to summarise, to close off this, you know, fantastic conversation. Well, in this opportunity to your shareholders or future shareholders or anyone who suddenly have a perk of interest after this video, what would be your thing, your pitch to these guys?
Look, I think that
especially
that
your
we've
long-suffering
certainly taken
shareholders.
a pause. Hot Chile, like everybody, has had a little bit of a re-rate, and that's an understatement in our share price. But you know, we're sitting with one of the most unique opportunities in the market, and certainly, I guess, financing has always been a key concern on Hot Chile. How are you going to pay for this? And people start to focus, you know, almost at the end of the road and say, "Wow, that could take $1 billion to build this thing, Christian." You know, oh, at this share price, oh my God, you're going to have to issue so many shares. Isn't it interesting when you look at just how these stories evolve? They're generally borne out by an asset that shows its mettle, and that asset generally attracts funding partners of repute. And you know, we've been in discussions with multiple parties really since this discovery started to unfold, and we had a number of parties all around us trying to give us money for several months, and even through the kickoff of the pandemic. Like I say, I think that given our market cap and given where we are pre-announcing our first resource and really pre-announcing our second resource on where we want that high-grade core to grow, you know, I think that there is a time to bring in partners, and there's a time to contemplate partnering up, and in time the company will do that, just as in time most of the major re-rate stories did. But I think that the coming months will be very exciting in terms of putting flesh on the bone. You're about to see the largest copper-gold inventory arrive on the ASX by a long way. We look at copper-gold plays on the ASX in terms of, you know, and this is outside of the hands of a major. Where do we sit in that pecking order of deposits going down the queue in terms of contained metal? Australian Stock Exchange doesn't have a copper-gold player with a Tier 1 inventory plus 5 million tonnes of copper. We sort of generally sit in the, you know, 2.5, 3 million tonnes and below. And then you look on the global stage and you realise that there's only a few names that sit with above 5 million tonnes of contained copper, and they generally have reasons why they're not a major market capitalisation. Either they have arsenic in the ore bodies, they sit in local communities that you can't access, or they're in very, very, difficult to develop jurisdictions. But there's only a handful of those. So to have, you know, finally Hot Chile being able to bring together all of this vision that's taken 10 years with, you know, a lot of success and a lot of luck out of the Cordillera acquisition. All of these things are coming to a head over the next 2 to 6 months. And I imagine that that financing question that seems to plague the market and create the sort of thing that holds back a SolGold at 30 million market cap, not dissimilar to where we were, where we are right now. And most people saying, gee, Nick, how are you going to fund this several $billion development over in Ecuador? I imagine these things change very rapidly, like they did for companies such as SolGold. And then that question stops being asked, and You know, you currently see SolGold with a market capitalisation of 800 million to $1 billion. And I'm not saying that we're the next SolGold. I would only dream to have a monster deposit such as that. We'll see what Cordillera becomes, but there is a lot to like right now. And I imagine those financing question marks that the industry and the market has will be solved in due course. And results and drill numbers do the talking, resources do the talking, and we'll see where we end up over the coming few months.
Oh, look, it's going to be very exciting because, you know, copper price is making a run back to where it was before it took the dive prior to COVID. But look, Christian, always great having a chat.
Yeah.
And, you know, I learned so much. I mean, porphyries are now my pet topic. But looking forward to more news, and let's hope we catch up again and see where you guys will be.
That's right. Hopefully around the timing of our first resources when we can when we talk about metal.
Great.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Noel.
Okay, bye.